Have you ever wondered how a superpower, an empire that seems like it'll last forever, can just vanish? Well, today we're digging through the ruins of the Roman Empire to find out. We're looking for what you might call a blueprint for collapse. I mean, it's a huge question, right? One that people have been asking for centuries. How does an empire that seems totally invincible, one that literally defines the world for everyone living in it, just end? But here's the thing. The fall of an empire isn't some big, dramatic moment. It's not one single battle or one really bad emperor. Nope. It's much more like a slow, painful unraveling that happens over hundreds of years. In that whole process, it starts from the inside, with these deep internal problems that start to weaken the very foundations of the society. Think of it like cracks forming in a wall, making it super vulnerable to any storm that comes along. So, to really get a handle on why Rome fell, we've got to look inside first. Let's peel back the layers, see what was really going wrong within its own borders long before everything came crashing down. Okay, so this really breaks it down for us. There were four huge problems just eating away at the empire from the inside out. First up, the army. It was stretched way too thin, guarding thousands of miles of border. So what did they do? They hired foreign mercenaries, guys who were fighting for a paycheck, not out of any real loyalty to Rome. You can see how that's a problem. Then there's the money. The empire was basically going broke. It was spending a fortune on the military and all its officials, but its tax base was shrinking. Which brings us to point number 3, the population. Plagues, bad harvests, it all meant fewer people. And fewer people means, well, fewer taxpayers and fewer Roman soldiers to recruit. And finally, there was this massive cultural shift happening with the rise of Christianity. Suddenly, for a lot of people, what happened in the next life became way more important than what happened to the empire in this one. So, with all these internal cracks getting wider and wider, the empire is becoming seriously fragile. And right on cue, a whole new cast of characters shows up at the gates, drawn to Rome's borders. So, let's meet this most wanted list, shall we? All right, first up, we've got the Goths. Now, these guys were a Germanic tribe living way out on the empire's eastern frontier. But as other groups started pushing in on them, they split into two main factions. Their relationship with Rome? Yeah, it was complicated from the start, and it was about to get a whole lot more violent. And this is a huge turning point, the year 378 AD. At the Battle of Adrianople, the Goths didn't just beat a Roman army, they absolutely annihilated it. We're talking the emperor himself dead, 2/3 of his entire army wiped out. It was a massive shock. For the first time, everybody saw that the mighty Roman military could be beaten. The armor had a chink in it. So what was pushing the Goths towards Rome in the first place? Well, something was coming from even further east. The Huns. These guys were feared horsemen from Central Asia, and they just swept into Europe like a force of nature, pushing every other tribe out of their way, and they were heading straight for Rome. And leading this terrifying force was one of the most feared names in all of history, Attila. He was so destructive, so devastating that he earned the nickname the Scourge of God. I mean, to the Romans, it must have felt like he was a punishment sent from the heavens. You can see Attila's career was basically a whirlwind. He pulls the Huns together in 434 and right away starts terrorizing the Eastern Roman Empire. Then, in 451, he turns his sights west, but he's actually stopped by a combined army of Romans and, you guessed it, Goths. But here's the crazy part. This great, feared conqueror, he doesn't die in some epic battle. Nope. Just 2 years later, he dies from a nosebleed. A nosebleed. And just like that, without him, his massive, terrifying empire just dissolves. Almost overnight. Okay, the last major group to jump into the fray. The Vandals. And they were clever. They went and took over North Africa, which was basically Rome's breadbasket, its main source of grain. Then they became a naval power, and from the sea, they were perfectly positioned to deliver one of the last, most devastating blows to the city itself. So, let's just recap where we are. We've got an empire that's rotting from the inside out, and a whole list of powerful enemies pushing in from all sides. The stage is set, and now the storm is about to break, right over the city of Rome itself. And then in 410 AD, something happens that was just unthinkable. The Goths, led by a guy named Alaric, they actually breached the walls and sacked the city of Rome.
You have to understand, for the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City had fallen to an enemy. The psychological shock across the empire was just immense.
And then it happens again. Just a few decades later, in 455, it's the Vandals' turn. They sail up from North Africa and sack the city all over again, this time just systematically looting it, taking everything of value. At this point, Rome is basically defenseless. It's just a shadow of what it once was. So let's put all these pieces together. When you look at all of this, what's the actual blueprint for collapse? What's the big lesson the fall of Rome teaches us? Well, it's not one thing. It wasn't just the internal problems, and it wasn't just the invasions from the outside. It was the deadly combination of both. You could say the internal decay, that weak economy, the overstretched army, that was like a pre-existing condition. And the external pressure from the Goths, the Huns, and the Vandals, that was the virus that the empire's weakened body just couldn't fight off anymore. And that right there is the crucial point. It's all about the relationship between the weakness inside and the threat outside. It's not like the Goths or the Huns were suddenly superhuman. It's that Rome itself had become fragile. It was hollowed out. The storm only broke because the walls, well, they were already full of cracks. And that, of course, leaves us with one last pretty big question to think about. If this is the blueprint for how a superpower collapses, internal rot making it vulnerable to external pressure, what does the fall of Rome have to teach us about the great powers and empires of our own world today?